So thank you and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I need to wait a little bit. So I will start by using this time to tell you that I'm very happy to be part of this, the 12th International Conference of Keeping Children and Young People Safe Online. So as you can see, the topic of my presentation is about how to raise awareness for safer and healthier sexting behaviors. So on a quick nutshell, the topics for my presentation will focus on the definition of sexting, concerns behind it, what are the risks involved, and what are social problems behind sexting. Also, the last part of the presentation will focus on the methodologies and the resources that the PT Safer Internet Centre, the Portuguese Safer Internet Centre, is developing. So feel free to ask questions, whether after this presentation or outside if you want to. So for you to learn more about the Portuguese Safer Internet Centre is very much likely the German or the Polish Safer Internet Centre. We have awareness services. We also have a helpline and a hotline service. Our main goal is to develop safer and more healthier use of the internet by empowering citizens to make informed, empowering citizens to make informed and conscious choices. We are not supporters of abstinence approaches that say, if it's risky or if it's dangerous, don't do it. No, instead we want to help people to get the most positive experience from using the internet, whether that is to safely build an online profile, to shop some video games, or to do sexting. So I'm going to talk about sexting. I hope by the end of this presentation I won't be known as that sexting guy, but if that happens, well, there's an hashtag for it, so that sexting guy. And so what about sexting? I've searched some definitions, and you can clearly search for some definitions about what is sexting. The first reference to sexting was perhaps in 2004 in a Canadian newspaper. That used the term sex messaging, but what does this really mean? So if you look at the definitions, you will see most of the time sharing of explicit content involving a cell phone. But if you think about this sending of sexually explicit content, this is not something new, because if you go back, you have cyber sex, or you have phone sex, or you have sending videotapes or audios to someone by mail, or even you have love letters. For instance, if you have read the history behind Napoleon in 1796, you probably are aware that he used to send love letters to Josephine, and there is even a very well-known line that is, one kiss in your heart and one lower, much, much lower. Clearly he was talking about kissing Josephine's feet. Now let's go about some concerns, and I posted here a paragraph that is of a very well-known psychology online newspaper, if you want. So in this article you see this sentence that with 20 to 30% of today's teens sexting, it is important that we educate our teens on the dangers associated on it. On the brighter side, we still have 70 to 80% of teens making good decisions when it comes to sexting. So this automatically puts these 20 to 30% in the bad decision group. If you see the act of sexting, among other things on the internet, is considered dangerous, so the most common advice that we give to teenagers is just don't do it at all. What I want you to know is that this advice is also promoted throughout legislation that makes sexting illegal for minors, because this content is considered child pornography. In some cases, this even creates loopholes where minors can have sex, but they can't do sexting. So I would like to question this paragraph that I just shared, because in a society where the advice we give is just don't do it, are we somehow making the victims have less and less support, because they will probably tend to not search for that much support if they felt judged because the right approach to sexting was just don't do it. But of course, at least there are not that many young people doing it, right? No, of course not. We already seen before in the presentations before, and in this BBC article, for instance, in the last year, you see that 4,000 cases of children taking explicit pictures was uncovered by this BBC news. Also, if you see in this year's article of Time, you already have percentages saying that 15% of teens that, say that they send sexting message, and 27% of them say that they already received it. And of course, we can expect these numbers to be not up to date, and also we can expect that children, since they are aware that doing sexting is not the right thing, they will give you socially desirable answers for this problem. So probably we are talking about way higher probabilities of they are doing it and engaging in sexting activities. So let's go talking about the risks of sexting. Here you have an example of a conversation of what I call sexting gone wrong, where this Jane Doe character asks the caller to asks us to do a video chat, which is cam to cam, and we said okay, either because we are feeling in some way pressured by it, or because we trust this character, this Jane Doe, because we feel bored, because we feel lonely, because we are stressed and we find this as a stress relief, because it will make our self-esteem better, because we think that Jane Doe might be interested in us, or maybe because we really have distrust in this fake profile. And it goes wrong, because she just say, okay, now you are in trouble. So we might be victims now of something called sextortion. So that person will try to ask us for more content or for money. And this can happen related to the fake profile part. Anyway, if that content gets shared, sometimes it gets the name of revenge porn. And revenge porn will end in exposing that person, this victim, us in this case, and will contribute to bullying and cyberbullying cases, which will contribute to isolation, despair, fear, and hopelessness. Okay, this is a very short version, and please don't take pictures of it, because now I want to show you the real problems behind it. So the hidden risks of sexting is, I talked about the fake profiles, but I didn't talk that Jane Doe perhaps have been investing months and months of her time doing something that's called grooming, which is investing time in building a trust relationship with us, and that may have influenced our option in saying, yes, I want to have sex with you by a smartphone. Also, whether there is sextortion or not, if this was done because if Jane Doe was an ex-partner or not and she decided to share this, if this involves or not sextortion, what we're talking about here is non-consensual content sharing. So I didn't give her permission to what she's about to do, that is sharing this online. And behind this, the real problem is a privacy violation, because I didn't say she could do it, and she's doing it. And she is messing up with my rights of not wanting to be exposed. And this, of course, will contribute to bullying and cyberbullying. But there is another factor here, that is the victim blaming. Because we live in a society where we say, don't do it, we are somehow helping to create situations when we say, yes, you were the one to blame, you were the one who did sexting. And what's behind this message on saying you shouldn't do it in the first place? Well, this helps. This is, by the way, influenced by gender roles, and of course you can think about it because not every answer to this problem is the same. You'll have different perspectives about, or different approaches to victims based on their gender, but these will affect and in fact reinforce the aggressor's behavior, and this means you will have more and more cases where grooming, fake profiles, and sextortion happen. And this is also a very perverse effect, because because I'm saying, so why did you do it? You're leaving a problem that you created yourself because you did sexting. I am somehow not providing the support the victim needs. Actually, that victim won't be much inclined to talk to me because she will feel judged about it, and this will contribute to this dark case scenario. So now that I showed you in this rabbit hole of the risks behind sexting, I want to organize little things. And we can see, I think, three main problems here. We have literacy problems, because people need to be aware of fake profiles, how to spot fake profiles, and they also need to be aware of the existing of these grooming and sextortion practices, which are predatory practices. You need to tackle some legislative problems, because sometimes these laws that we create are not covering it to the fully extension the privacy violations in the bullying and cyberbullying. And also you have social problems related and social challenges related to it, as it's not okay to suffer from peer pressure even though you will feel it. It's not okay for us to blame victims, but we still do it. And it's not okay to attribute default gender roles just because we thought that might be the answer. So in these two last, you also need literacy to change the perspective. So now, this is the first part of my presentation. The last part of it is about how can you change this? How can you contribute to a safer and healthier sexting culture? So, as we see, clearly, it's the abstinence approach is not really going to work, because young people will do it, whether you like it or not. So we shall instead try to make them make sexting in a more safer way. How can we do that? At first, we need to tackle those problems that I show you. We need to discuss things like slut shaming, like bullying, like hate speech, like harassment. We need to talk this in the classes, in our house, with our kids. We need to explain what it means consent, and if that doesn't happen and we still share something, we are incurring in a privacy violation, and that is a crime. We need to create moments, we need to create times where people can actually talk about this, whether by doing activities or just having a simple chat. We need to use an approach that we, the Portuguese Safer Internet Centre, call smart sexting. So what it is, the smart sexting, and then these are basically tips. And I like to think that these tips are basically like you handing out condoms to a teenager, because you recognize that he can potentially or will have sex, so you just want to give them condoms so they won't catch any STDs or get pregnant. It's basically the same line of thought behind it. So at first, if a teenager is about to do sexting, he fully needs to understand the risks involving it. And we are not saying this so he just doesn't do it. He needs to know this so he can be aware of the problems he can face or not. Then we need to explain him, or he needs to understand how can he create content that doesn't track him back. So I need to take pictures. So if I'm going to take a picture, I'm not going to give him away my face or birthmarks or tattoos or even that funny wallpaper that I have in my room, because that can get back to me and I can be identified by that, and that will have a consequence in my online and offline reputation. We need to understand how we can use platforms such as Snapchat or Instagram or even WhatsApp now with the 7 minutes time, when we can set a timer so that the content we send can be deleted. But we also need to be aware of the limitations of this software, because we still can take screenshots of it. So we need to know how to efficiently hide and lock content in our devices, whether they are phones, smartphones, laptops, because if we are having or we are storing this content, then at least we need to make it as safe as possible. Also, we need to understand that if we have content that is not ours, we are never, ever allowed to share it if we don't have consent to do it. And this is like the baseline of everything. Also, if we are storing things that are just not ours but from our partners, we have an increased responsibility of making sure that content will be safe. So if we are storing this content, whether it is in a disk or in our smartphone, we need to be sure that it will stay safe. And eventually, if we are using things like social networks to share this content or even cloud services to do it, we need to do regular cleanups, because as you are probably aware, there have been lots of breakouts in databases, in cloud services, and even in social networks that end to expose our partners when we do sexting. And then, of course, and this is the bottom line of everything, if anything goes wrong, the teenager must know he can trust a responsible adult or even a hotline. He needs to know that if someone is talking to them and even trying to do sextortion, talk with him like, okay, I won't expose you and instead you are going to give me something more. They need to know that they need to stop that conversation. And in fact, they need to start taking screenshots of that conversation because it just turned into evidence. I'm seeing lots of people taking pictures of it. Feel free to come by and I'll give you the slides. I intend to share it to as many people as I can. So we developed some resources in the Portuguese Safer Internet Centre, not just about sexting, of course, but in this case, we developed content that is related. We have leaflets targeting mainly adolescents and young people about the risks of sexting and how they can do to start this smart sexting approach. We even created specific content, and we are talking about video content. We did a web series called Net com Consciência, which is about a story of a Portuguese young couple, João and Joana, that are in love and they are living their love story through the online apps. It's not just about sexting, but it has to do with sexting, cyberbullying, with online reputation, among other stuff. And we even have videos that have been done by young people themselves, like the last example, of a story of cyberbullying or, as you want, non-consensual content sharing. We have even been pioneers in investing in what we call the theater awareness approach. So we have these three main figures in Portugal. They are well-known actors, and we created a 1-hour theater script that talks about lots of problems regarding sexting, online privacy, GDPR, and lots of stuff about online awareness, and we make it go throughout schools, municipalities, and this resource, in this case, in this methodology, it proves to be very successful because we can engage an entire population, not just of young people, but also of teachers and carers and professionals and social workers. Now, by the last, and I'll promise to be quick, I just want to talk a little bit about the Helpline Challenge, a methodology that we created and we perfected this year. We have already tested it not just with the Portuguese population, but also, for instance, in Luxembourg, I think it was in April, right, Sophia? So here you can see a picture of one of the sessions where we did it in Portugal with health workers. The Helpline Challenge, it's a methodology that I would want to talk a little bit about you. So what's it for? You can use this activity. It's an activity that we did that will last more or less 1 hour, depending on how much cases you want to input in the Helpline Challenge. It will allow you to raise awareness in a group, and it's good after you do an awareness session about a specific topic because you can create a script, a caller script, where you can talk about a problem, and this way you will validate if the content that you have just passed in your awareness session, if it got stuck in the minds of your audience. So how can you do it? I'm just going to show you a little bit. You do a quick setup. You have a central stage where you'll have a caller, a calling figure to that helpline, which can be you or you can select another person. You will need one operator and 1 to 4 supporters. And how will this go? So you just need to do something that we call the caller script. So it's basically a text like this that will hand out the personality and the problems of the character that is calling to the helpline. So it will say, okay, in this case, I picked one that we did that is about sexting. In this case, you have a little girl who was playing online, and then she met like the love of her life, and they decided to start talking in this web chat, and then she went through the messenger, and then she did a video chat, and then she couldn't see him, and then he started to do what's called sextortion. And so basically, you're just giving this script. That caller is not supposed to read this, at least when he's doing the role play. He just needs to understand what that character is feeling, and he needs to role play it. And in the other side, you will have the operator and what we call the multidisciplinary support team, and their main objective is to listen to this call, is to understand what's the problem, and using the information that you just passed throughout the awareness session, try to solve it. and then in the end, the caller will evaluate that call. So the person who did the role play as a caller, you will evaluate from 1 to 10 how was the performance of the helpline support, and then you can bring this case and discuss it in the rest of the class or the audience you're with. So I'm almost finishing, and I want to say that for us, in order to do a good job towards young people, I think, in my perspective, that we need to stop fighting the changes that future will bring, but instead we might need to embrace them. Sometimes it won't be easy, or it cannot be just always good, but by embracing it, we can try and tackle the risks that come from embracing the future, and also the challenges that coming from future. And that's why I don't mind if by the end of this session you will call me that sexting guy. So thank you.